It's a real pleasure to talk to Chris Mills from Kereru Brewing and down there in Upper the Hut, from the amazing part of the world that has become Brewtown. How are you, Chris?
I'm very well, Jason. Good morning, and happy Monday to you. Today, I'm actually not at the brewery. I'm in the original brewery site, which is under our house in our rumpus room, which is now my office. So
tell us that story, mate. It's one that's been going for a while, and it did start in the garage. It's like a true started in the garage story, which has become an incredible award-winning brewery. You know, Champion Small Brewer 2018 at the AIBAs. You know, you've got to be thrilled, mate.
Yeah, pretty excited about that. So it began, it was 2010, and we were facing a bit of the global financial crisis. And what were we going to do? For me, it made times people drank beer, but they didn't hire freelance visual effects technical directors. And not knowing what we couldn't do, we thought we'd have a crack at it. And here we are.
We just cut out there a little bit, Chris. We got up to starting in the brewery about 10 years ago. But your background, saying is you're a special effects technical director. Holy cow.
Yes. So came to New Zealand for the film industry. We stayed for the food. Did my dash down in Miramar at Weta as a freelancer, and you know, really long, hard hours. Quite used to that, and that feels really familiar running a brewery as well. Similar long 7-day weeks, and just keep going. Just to confirm, is the sound coming through all right? Yeah,
it's sounding great now, Chris. Thank you. You know,
sure.
These are the issues with modern technology, but we get through them like we do with a lot of other problems. Like you'll know that we don't use the C word here, Chris, and I'm not meaning COVID-19, so we can use that one. Has that been a pain in the you over the past few weeks?
We've gotten through it. Fortunately, in lockdown, people wanted to get some beer delivered to them, so that kept us busy with a reduced staff. So thankfully, online sort of helped keep things shifting along for us. And now that the courier system is absolutely jammed through and you can't move anything through it, we're transitioning back to a bit more of normality, which feels good. So the cellar door is finally open, and we've got people coming through and shop. So that's exciting, familiar faces again, and really exciting to see New Zealand coming out of something that could have been a lot worse. And I'm hoping it stays that way.
Look, the feeling and the support and the empathy, Chris, has just been incredible. You know, we've had customers contacting us regularly. How are you guys going? When are you going to be open again? So that sort of outpouring has been really beautiful, and it can only be good for you know, businesses like yours and mine. Where we've done it tough. It was so weird. It was just so strange, sort of having that come down so hard and fast.
It was. I think the only place that's done it hard and fast is Mongolia. And it's a worthwhile thing. The Mongolian response COVID is actually well worth reading about, but where they've had no deaths and no local transmission, but they went harder and faster. But anyhow, that's them. We're here.
So much coulda, shoulda, might have. You know, it's such a. I don't want to use that U word, but it's been just crazy times, hasn't it?
I feel that we're really lucky to be where we are for so many reasons, and I'm just pleased that we're able to have this conversation today and talking about actually getting back to it, and thrilled to be part of what you're doing there as your Brew Buddy for an extended month where we started and kind of took a hiatus, and now we're back.
Oh, but look, it's a real pleasure. I want to thank you for supporting us like that, Chris. You know, the relationships we have with great New Zealand brewers, and I feel so privileged to be a part of that, you know, because let's face it, we're retailers, we're hangers on, mate, and we live and die on your reputation and the quality of the beers that you make. Oh. No, that, well, you know, and we don't say that for platitudes. We say that because we're here to represent you in the best way that we possibly can, and that's always been our goal, and to grow this industry, you know.
Absolutely, but we couldn't do this without you as well, to have a venue to move our beer through, to
Thank
bring
you.
us
That's
to the
enough
public.
of that's enough of that bottom padding. So Chris, let's talk about the real stuff.
Don't
Let's
let
talk
your head
about
get too big, but
beers.
sure.
So you, like, generally across the range, you take a more sort of European, a more traditional approach to brewing. Is that fair to say?
I'd say that's where we started. So for myself, brewing, the coursework that I went through, I say coursework, I self-taught myself how to brew beer. So I bought 5 different textbooks, mostly with European influences. So there was an American-German manual, there was a full German book, there was a Belgian book that was written in Britain, and then I have a South African book that covers a lot of good yeast management things. So between those, I would open them up and I would read common sections through them, and kind of in the same way that you might go online and see who's saying the same thing and look for the overlaps. That's kind of how I built my technique. So I'd read about malt mashing for all these different sources and take from that a composite of what I felt was appropriate to go and work with, plus, you know, the trials and tribulations of doing it wrong and making mistakes and then figuring out what works best. So now that it's not me who's on the tools as much doing the brewing, so I've got Emma, who's the lead brewer at the brewery, and Jesse is working alongside her as an assistant, and they're bringing their own particular slant to how things work. Emma's palate is fantastic, and she's got some wonderful new beers that have come along that are winning prizes for us, and it's a real treat to be able to say it's not my beer anymore, it's our beer. And
was there a bit of separation anxiety around that, Chris, letting go of those responsibilities and sort of handing over, if you like?
I'd say yes, but only in that I didn't really know how to delegate when I started. And delegation is one of those management tools that, yep, and if you can't, you have to learn how to do it, and that's really helped a lot, where I can now focus on the marketing. I definitely step in and I can do all the jobs, but there's too much for one person to do now. So,
and that's a good problem.
Yes. So we're also brewing some beers for a few other people as well. It's not just ourselves that are in our tanks. So we've gotten back into our contract brewing, and pretty happy with the results from that. And it enables us to be able to try some new things that we might not have considered when someone comes to us and says, could you make a beer and do the following procedures to it? And it can be challenging, it can be rewarding, a bit nerve-wracking, but that's just business on any day, really. You know,
there are 2 sides to our incredible brewing industry, and of course one of them are the folks who have stainless, who have bricks and mortar, and of course the other side is the contract brewing side of things. Where perhaps maybe that contract brewing side of thing is a bit more, and there are always exceptions, but maybe a bit more pie in the sky, a bit more dreamy, a bit more, I fancy myself as a brewer and a brand. I'll just go to someone, tell them what to do, and my beer will be amazing. Have there been times where you've looked at the recipe and gone,
we really like it if someone comes to us and we're helping them out with capacity, if they can hand us an actual example of the beer so we know what we're trying to achieve as opposed to guessing. There have been a couple recipes that we've developed in concert with someone where it's never been made before and we're the first ones out with it. But generally, most of the folks that we're working with know what they're after, and really it's about trying to deliver the best quality results we can, because our reputation and theirs are all on the line, and you're only as good as the worst batch of beer you've ever done.
That's totally true. You know, in a lot of ways, and just mentioning reputation, you've carved one out around being an ethical producer, which must be quite challenging. There must be a lot of limitations that come with that. How do you cope with those?
Well, you ask questions of your suppliers, and you just keep after them. And I'd say, Kiwis have a tradition of whinging.
We're quite good at
You
that.
just did the supply chain and say, look, yeah, could we? So the main case in point that I'm thinking of today is and the glass that they've supplied us came on pallets that had this red plastic shrink wrap on the bases. We couldn't recycle that, so it all had to get thrown out. And I kept going back to them and saying, could you please use clear plastic? And lo, they have done that. So now that's a positive change that's happened, and that will go industry-wide. So anybody receiving new glass now can take that shrink wrap that's on the pallets and put it in a bin, and it gets recycled and will be reused. Whereas previously we couldn't. And we're just a tiny company that's made some requests, but it's had an impact. And it's great to feel like that actually works. Other decisions like the heat exchanger on our refrigeration plant, where it just seemed a good idea at the time. It was expensive. I didn't know any better, but I bought it anyway. And the reality is that after 6 years of running this particular system, I've had free hot water coming off of our refrigeration plant that fills up a 4,000 liter tank, and it saves us literally many dollars a day that have added up to the point where the whole thing has paid for itself in 6 years' time.
Awesome. That's great news. Look,
That's,
one of the things
that's awesome.
Experiences I had with
yeah,
you.
so it does.
So, sorry, Chris.
Go ahead.
I'll come on in. One of the experiences I had with you recently is we get a lot of customers who ask for a gluten-free beer, and
Yes,
we were talking with you for a while, but you had the backbone to call up and say, look, I just don't feel comfortable about supplying it. I can't be sure if it's going to go through
in a keg.
completely gluten-free, and it's just not worth taking the risk. And once you hear that, of course, that's so obvious, and I'm not at all offended by that or upset by it. I just thought it was a great thing to do, and it's important that people know there are some folks who won't forsake their integrity for a buck.
Thank you. But one of the things. Sorry, this is going to be the back patting here. You're somebody who I feel I can have that conversation with, and there's enough of the history and there's a strength of the relationship where we can have the frank discussions, and that's what's important, and that helps that integrity to be supported. So thank you.
No problems.
It's all good. But
the beer, Chris.
yeah, sure. So which part would you like to know about?
Man, I'm just on a real Pilsner buzz at the moment, and Big Pigeon is
you're frozen there.
just always sensational. It looks beautiful.
Oh, yes.
You can tell it's a beer that's been brewed with a lot of love. You can tell that with a beer when it's in the glass, it almost glows.
Yep.
Right? It's got that incredible, beautiful straw, sort of yellowy character, and it's just so crisp and fresh.
Mm-hmm.
Is that your biggest seller? Which is the biggest seller in the range?
Well, it's a toss-up. I mean, Resonator does really well. Big Pigeon Pilsner does really well. The gluten-free Oro is also holding its own amongst those. Definitely hoppier beers are selling quite well for us. And, we love it when the beer is beautiful and golden and luminous like you're describing. I think that's, testament to the quality of the malts that we're working with. Emma's skill as a brewer, using what she's learned over the years and crafting some really, really beautiful beers. One that I think of in particular would be like our Manuka Sati, which is entirely her creation. And it looks like it's glowing in the glass, and it's absolutely fantastic. And that's Gladfield malt for their specialties. In the case of Big Pigeon Pilsner, that's just straight down the middle Pilsner malt from Gladfield, and handled in the right way, it comes up beautiful like that.
Man, it's just sensational. It'll be definitely in the top 3 Pilsners that I'm enjoying at the moment. The other thing.
Oh, thank you,
Chris. Oh, no worries, buddy. Thank you. The other thing is, so Pilsners, everyone thinks Pilsner and Lager are sort of quite basic styles of basic beers. But the cold hard truth of those beers is they actually take longer and take more effort to produce than something more perceived, complex, like an IPA or a pale ale or a specialty beer. So can you take us through that process and explain why those beers are
Oh,
intense and difficult to produce?
sure. It comes down to the yeast. So we're working with a bottom fermenting lager yeast, and that lager yeast is designed, well, its inherent characteristic is it ferments at a colder temperature. So it takes longer for it to do the prior work of converting the ethanol. It's a yeast that tends to be a bit dirty in its qualities while it's doing it. So there's a lot of sulfurous outgassings from the tank, and the beer needs time for that to be reprocessed back into the yeast and metabolized and to basically just clean itself up. So that lagering, the storing of the beer for at least 4 to 6 weeks in tank at sitting down around 0 degrees is really essential to the point of having a good, clean, beautiful tasting beer. And we refuse to not use the lager yeast to do that. We could chunk out a Pilsner if we used American ale yeast and just fermented it a little bit cooler, and we might be able to jam them out every 3 weeks, but that's not us. We think,
the trick, isn't it, Chris? I mean, it's that lagering period and that yeast use that creates that beautiful beer, and you can't speed up time, right? You just can't.
No. And there's certain steps in the process that you cannot cheat. You wouldn't get it any other way. The same thing with aging beer in a barrel. Whether it's souring, whether it's trying to get the whiskey and the oak character out, it takes time. And it's annoying that it takes time, because I'd love to be able to turn things over a lot quicker. But in some ways, I think the beer has its own rhythm, and you have onto it.
That's a great phrase, actually. You know, rhythm and beer. That's I can't agree more. That's beautiful, actually. A beautiful analogy.
Cheers.
So we've got Maidstone Lager, and there's, you know, the beer sort of blogs and things are all going crazy for lagers. They think that's the next big style after hazies. So I'm kind of happy to see that as a retailer, because we try and bring mainstream beer drinkers over to this sort of beer, and you've got it, that core range and those gateway or transitional beers. And so, you know, Maidstone, another beautiful beer, and this one a little more sort of caramelly colored perhaps in the glass, and that's in that Vienna style. So can you explain to us the difference between a Vienna style and perhaps a New Zealand lager?
I would say that what's getting that Vienna characteristic is some specialty malts. So some purists would tell us that our Vienna is a little lighter than it ought to be. I've taken, for my source of inspiration, it finds its roots back to Germany. Vienna, we're inspired by the Mexican Vienna lagers. So in actual fact, Corona is technically in that class of beers. Ours has more hops, a little more toasty. So Negro Modelo would be another one that I'd look at. That's a bit darker in its color. So somewhere in that range, I was after something that had maltiness, had the nice bready characters that came through, but with that toasty caramel that you get. So that's Aurora malt from Gladfield that's helping to do a lot of the lifting. Vienna malt as well. Those contribute some sugars, but they have some other characters that add lovely color to the beer and flavor. Not very hoppy, straight up Wakatu hops all the way through it. So it's not about the hop character, it's about the malts and the yeast and the marriage between the two and time. And that's a beer that we first brewed back in, I think 2014 is when we made that for the first time. So we've had a lot of practice at it. Some of our techniques have been improved and changed, from how we filter our beer to how we transfer it through mashing and lautering and getting it in the kettle. And I think it's all about, you know, learning and improving ourselves and not wanting to just settle for, well, that's okay, we'll just keep doing it the same way. So I've really opened the door and said, you know, to Emma in particular, if it hasn't got a gold medal, you can do whatever you want to it to try to make it a better beer. And I think she's having a good time. Yes. So the ones that do and have trophies, don't touch them. They're great as they are. And if it ain't broke, don't fix it. but Maidstone has yet to win a significant prize, so we'll keep working on it. And it could be that it's just not popular enough to rate highly like that, but I think it's a beautiful beer. It's really lovely drinking. That's sort of where the Piola Cerveza comes into that, with a project that we did with a local bar in Wellington, and where they'd asked us for a cerveza, which is, again, sort of that South American inspired lagers. There's a lot to be learned from that, and a lot of joy to be found in playing with those beer styles.
Look, I totally agree with you. And,
yeah.
and you know, when we head towards the more lighter styles, you have way less room to move in terms of, you know, the quality of that beer and what you get out of it, because the ingredients are so simple and right there's just nowhere to go. You can't afford floors. You can't afford to make stuff up or taste it and go, you know what, that's okay, let's get it out. There's no room for error with those styles.
Let me just get rid of that. Sorry. Yeah, no, it's there. You're right. There's nowhere to hide if you've done it wrong. And again, all of our beers are tasted and checked through the process of it. You get to know when it's not working early on. So if the wort's not tasting right in the kettle, or if it tastes funny during fermentation, we will fail those, and you never get to find out about them until we talk about them right now. And I say, well, yeah, I've dumped a few batches down the drain in the last year, but we all do that, and that's reputation and quality.
Yeah, that's a big call, man. And again, those are the foundation stones of integrity, reputation, quality. So, you know, and a lot of folks don't understand that when you're chucking 2,000 litres of wort down the drain, that's a significant spend. But it's not worth damaging your reputation.
Oh, yeah. I would also just point out as an aside, we don't just chuck beer straight down the drain neat. We dilute it quite heavily. It gets dribbled around the drain, and a lot of water goes down with it, because that would be basically an industrial accident if you put that much. It's basically the same as putting milk down the drain. You wouldn't do it. So we have to dilute it and ease the load on the system downstream from us at the waste treatment plant, because we don't want to be upsetting things.
Oh, for sure. That's great.
But yeah, sorry, that was probably a bit of a tangent that you weren't expecting.
No, absolutely. I wouldn't expect anything less from you, Chris. I know you stand firmly on those things that you know, and I really encourage you to keep doing that. Although you might get a lot of flack here and there, but mate, I'm with you.
Cheers.
The other thing, the other beer I wanted to talk about, Chris, the Resonator. So.
Oh yes.
So what I'd say about that is that that's more sort of maybe in, you know, old school New Zealand beer. It's got that, you know, it's in the name, you know, resiny characters,
yes,
like really huge hop forward, and you know, as I'm getting older, you know, it kicks off the reflux really nicely. Yep. But that's a boomer. That's been there for a long time.
Yeah. It has. So that's a beer that brewer Alex brought to us. That was a gold medal winning homebrew of his before he started brewing with us back in 2014, 2015. He was one of our first hires that we had. He's moved on to do other things at this point, but it's a fantastic legacy that he's left with Kereru. And it's one of those beers where we really haven't mucked about with the recipe very much. It's brewed the same way Alex did it. We don't want to touch it, because whilst it hasn't won a gold medal, it has a really solid following, and I don't want to toy with it and risk losing the fans that have enjoyed it for so long to, oh, what have you done to it? And there's other beers we can play with.
Sure.
But yeah, Resonator, it's got way lots of hops in it.
This is something I talk to with all brewers about, and you know, it's always great to get a gong, to get an award, to win something significant like, you know, Champion Small Brewer at the Australian Independent Beer Awards 2018. Yep. It's just sensational, and that talks to the range. You know, that talks to you as a business and what you offer. And it's hard. It must be so hard when, you know, you go back and enter those awards and nothing comes of it. And but I just want to tell you, Chris, keep making great beer, because seriously,
Cheers.
for me, those awards don't really matter that much. You know, I think it's about what you do every day and that consistency and
Yes.
how you push it out there that is most important.
I like those awards because it recognizes the effort that our team puts into it. And they get to see that there's something that comes on the back of it besides just some comments that show up on social media and fans that like what we do. But it's a testament to their hard work and the quality and care and love that goes into making what we do. And you know, you can't rely or expect or count on anything like that, but it's always a treat when it does happen. So,
nice, mate. Now, you know, probably, you know, one of my all-time favorites. So we have an event every year at the Beer Spot called "The Russians Are Coming," and we put in big Baltic porters and, you know, Russian imperial stouts and stuff. But we always love having imperial nibs. Like that is,
oh yes,
a sensational beer, and it's got all that that coffee and chocolate note, but you just get that lovely underlying coconut flavor coming through, which just like tops it off. It's just an amazing beer. You know, what was the inspiration behind that, and is it still as popular as ever?
oh yes, no, it keeps trucking along and has a regular following, and I think the coconut beers that we produce are amongst our signature beers that we brew. I think we have a pretty good reputation for making dark beers as well. Alex took my For Great Justice recipe, and we basically doubled it and did a few tweaks to it, but that's what became Imperial Nibs. And it did well at a Wellington Beer Festival. That would have been Midwinter Ales Fest 2014. And it hasn't slowed down since. So it did well at the New World Beer and Cider Awards a number of years ago, and that was a huge and significant event for us because we had to brew an awful lot of it to satisfy some requirements for having won that particular prize, and that was very, very exciting. And you know, the beer hasn't changed really. So it's finicky, it's fussy, it's difficult to make. We do go back and forth a little bit in terms of how we get the vanilla character into it. It's store-bought vanilla right now. So
sorry, Chris,
we're actually making our own vanilla.
We just had a little outage. We just had a little outage there when you were explaining some of the ingredients. So just go back to me.
Sure. Sure. Where did you lose me?
You were just starting to talk about, you said it's fussy and finicky beer.
Oh, yes.
And then you went into the ingredients and dropped out a little bit.
Sure. What I was talking about is that's a beer that also has some vanilla that's added to it. So it's vanilla cacao and coconut. Early days we've tried liquid vanilla, vanilla essence made from vanilla pods that have been steeped in bourbon by commercially. Also tried vanilla ones where you split them open, put them in a bag and hang them in the tank with everything. And we're now actually making our own vanilla. So we've got some particular tricks up our sleeve for getting a bit more vanilla character in, and I think it's actually improved some of the recent batches of it where it's really delicious. But sorry, you're right there?
Yeah, that's okay.
Every time every time it's a little bit different, and I just always hope that people are going to enjoy the end result. So nowadays though,
it's an absolute boomer, Chris. You know, and now that the
cheers.
weather's sort of getting a little bit cooler, it's just a great go-to. So, you know, here's another question I like to ask breweries. You're committed to core ranges now, and that's just a fait accompli, I guess, and something that's super important to help grow our industry and educate people about different styles and things like that. Like busting out that core ranges, is that does that get frustrating sometimes, just having to do that core grind and augment now and then with specialties, or how do you cope with that?
Well, what we've the way we've dealt with that is our core range was predicated on a mixed six-pack that we were releasing into grocery in 330 ml bottles. We've recently done a big rework of our range. You may have noticed our beers are showing up in cans now, so that's been a significant change for us. And that's given us an opportunity to take a step back, look at what's been going into those mixed six-packs, and the original box that we were making was for a customer that actually ultimately didn't end up or putting that mix on their shelves. So we felt let's put our best foot forward. Again, if it's got a gold medal, it should go in the mixed six-pack. So this year we're making some changes to the core range, some standbys that people have loved and I adore. So Silver Stream Pale Ale, for example, is one of my favorite beers that we've made. It was one of the first beers that I made here where I'm seated right now, but it's being retired. And Hop to It was another original beer that was adjacent to that, but it's been re-envisioned by Emma and it's turned into a Pacific Pale Ale instead of an ESB. And it's beautiful, but it's now making up this new range that's going into cans. Karangosa is another beer that's probably going to take a hiatus, but we'll probably bring those back as seasonals occasionally because they're lovely, they're beautiful beers, and they're not gone.
That, Chris.
They're just taking a break.
Karangosa is something else. That's like so unique.
So that was Natasha's idea. We'd found some seaweed that was a fantastic snack at Moore Wilson's in Wellington, and she was like, "Can we put this in a beer?" And I was like, "I don't know. What's a salty beer style?" And that's where we learned to go off back in 2013, I think. So it's been a while that we've been making that. So
we hear so many stories about wacky ideas and accidents that become staples from a brewery's range, and I just love that about New Zealand brewers. We're not scared. We're not. Listen to me. I'm such a dick. I'm saying but I feel like New Zealand brewers aren't so scared to to give something a go, and like we always try and represent beers at the beer spot as sort of new world styles, and I never get sick of saying this, as I want New Zealand breweries and brewers to be as regarded as our vintners and vineyards are, for exactly the same reasons. So the quality of the ingredients, the amazing skill of our brewers.
I wonder how often those innovative beers are actually a result of accidents that have been salvaged and not gone wrong. Like, oh shit, how are we going to get that to market? Well, we'll just see if we can save it. It's too much money to throw out.
Oh, God.
And lo, something interesting is born. So,
behold the miracle. Yeah. So the thing for you, Chris.
I meant to do it.
Yeah, totally. Look, I'll take you through the recipe sheet. So, Chris, last year you launched your barrel aging program. Is that right, or was it a bit earlier?
It's actually a bit earlier than that. So in 2017, we released our first batch of Night Spirit. So I had managed to get my hands on 4 barrels from the New Zealand Whiskey Collection. We made a batch of Imperial Moonless Stout. Some went to be Black Ruby, some went to just be straight beer, and some went into these amazing original 1960s era coopered oak barrels that had held bourbon and then held whiskey from the Wilson Distillery down in Oamaru, and now part of the New Zealand Whiskey Collection. I loved that flavor that was coming through, and so the first release was in 2017. There wasn't any of it. It was just about 1,500 bottles total. Now we have a few more. Last year we certainly released the most of them that we've done, and some rather audacious ones with truffles added. Someone brings you black truffles and you say, yes, I'll take all of them, thank you very much. And then you ask, well, what am I going to do with them? And it just happened to be on that day that I'd had a batch of Serafina that I'd decanted into a tank, and we figured, well, why not just put it in there and we'll see what we get. And that's what became Gilding the Lily. And now we've got Pie in the Sky, and there's some more Night Spirit coming through. There's quite a lot of them, but they're these are beers I can't ever repeat, because when the whiskey carry out, that's gone. You're left with some nice oak barrel with, and they will age gracefully. They'll be beautiful beers for many, many years, but you'll never get them again, and I'll never be able to make them again. And it's not a really sensible, sustainable business model to do it, but I'm really, really chuffed to have been able to do that, actually. And it'll just be one of those fond memories eventually. And if you're lucky, you get your hands
one
on
of
some of the bottles.
privileges of owning a beer retailer is that from time to time our friends come to us with some of these examples, and you know, we can't get them in keg, which is our mojo, but you bring a couple of bottles in and wow, you know, it's something else. So, you know, not blowing my horn or anything, but I'm so happy to have been on the end of a couple of those. So.
Yep. Well, we should probably have a chat afterwards. I might be able to sort you out for something.
Oh, that'd be fantastic. Hey, Chris, you're a busy man, so I'll let you go from here, mate. I really appreciate your time and the great beers that you make, which just really help put forward our industry together as a group. And I know you're a great collaborator too, so that doesn't go unnoticed, mate. So thank you very much, mate, and all the best for what's coming up. And I hope it's blue skies and green fields after this crazy time we've had.
Yeah. Indeed. Well, I look forward to coming up and having a beer or three with you and carrying the tradition forward. So cheers for that, and thanks for your support, and it's a pleasure to be part of what you're doing. Thanks.
Thank you, Chris.